Welcome to Monologues by Hassie, where I'm going to be dropping unsolicited brain dumps from the depths of my grey matter. I'll talk about life, money, society, and self-development, plus whatever else lies up there, whilst hopefully not getting cancelled in the process. Happy New Year and welcome to 2024. With the passing of the previous year, it is always a great time to reflect on how you've done and have some sort of idea of what you'd like to achieve this year and beyond. And in terms of planning and reflecting, it is something that I've been doing as early back as 2017. Of course, the format in which I create plans and the format in which I reflect has always changed. That is, I think, natural. I simply do what suits me at a particular time. But fundamentally, it is very important to have these plans or have some sort of idea where you're going, because it gives you a lot of power. And if you have been in the process of creating some sort of plan, be it a yearly plan or a longer term plan, then when you begin to reflect, you can actually compare how your year has tracked according to the goals and objectives that you set out. Now, companies do this all the time, but sometimes as people, we will go to work and we will think about KPIs and OKRs and all of these acronyms that they have, but we won't do that same process for our own personal goals. And what I did and what I would recommend you doing, and I think a big misconception is people always feel like it is already January 1, it's too late to start planning, or I should have done that at the end of last year. I think using January 1 as a marker for picking up resolutions or goals or doing planning, really it's just an arbitrary marker. You can decide to pick something up or change your habits or change the way you're doing things anytime you want. It is never too late. You can simply set the start point and go from there. Now, with that out of the way, one thing that I would recommend doing, and one thing that I did at the end of 2023, is on December 30th, I had essentially what I would call a business meeting arranged with a group of friends who were all committed to reviewing their 2023 and sharing their 2024 goals and aspirations. And the format of this session was divided into three pieces. The first was to review and reflect your 2023 against the goals that you set at the start of the year. So we were really asking ourselves, what did we aim to achieve in 2023? What goals did we hit and what did we exceed in? What did we excel in? What are we proud of? And then what weren't we proud of? What did we not hit and why do we think we didn't hit it? And we were trying to probe ourselves and ask ourselves questions such as, what would you have done differently or sought to improve? So the first component of that session was everyone did a presentation on their previous year. It was fundamentally a retrospective, which if you're from a software engineering culture, often at the end of every month, we will do a retrospective on how that month went, how we tackled our work. But it's very important to do that for our years as well. And the next component was, what did we want to achieve in 2024? And along with the goals that we'd like to achieve, how do we think we're going to achieve them? Are there timeframes? And very importantly, what are the fundamental values behind your goals? Which I always think is important. It is important to give your goals meaning, because once your goals have meaning, I think you are more likely to stick to them because it actually has significance in your life. And if you've put a goal down and you can't find any meaning for it, then it probably shouldn't be a goal. So it's a very good way of evaluating whether you should be doing something or you shouldn't be doing something. And then the last component of this session was a feedback component. So the crucial aspect of doing this reflection and going through our goals and aspirations for the coming year in a group was not so we could feel good about saying what we're going to achieve and get a dopamine hit, but so other people could give us feedback, both on how we performed in the previous year, but also if there are any weak areas in our plans. And that criticism is very important because everyone has a blind spot. So I have a blind spot and other people can see my blind spot. And it is very easy for me to see other people's blind spots. It's one of those things where you don't see it in yourself, but it's easier to see in other people. So So if you surround yourself with a group where you're comfortable to criticize each other and take criticism, you can, to a certain degree, help uncover each other's blind spots. So by thinking about your goals and the methods you want to use to achieve them, you can get some very useful feedback. Now, in terms of my own year, when I was doing my own reflection, I had a series of, I would say, 5 high-level goals at the start of 2023. I mean, the first was I wanted to buy a home. I wanted 100,000 invested in my stock portfolio. I wanted to be fitter than ever, to grow my skills and knowledge, and to increase my impact, which with a particular focus on this podcast. Now, in terms of how I tracked, what I thought I did well in was getting to $100,000 was a relatively simple goal for me because I was almost there. I think the reason I made it a goal was because it was very psychological. To hit 6 figures being in my portfolio was a nice feeling. And I didn't end up buying a house. So that's something I didn't do, which I will come to later. But because I had that as a goal, I actually reached a peak amount of savings because I was saving for a deposit. So that was a very good thing. With fitness, this year was absolutely incredible. By this year, I mean 2023. So the previous year, I ended up becoming very good at running. And by very good at running, I don't mean that in an absolute way. I mean that relative to my previous self, I became very good at running. So I ran a 14-kilometer race called City to Surf in Sydney, and I also ran a 42-kilometer marathon. Now, that wasn't easy, and I technically didn't run the whole way, but I finished the marathon within the qualifying time to finish a marathon. I didn't get disqualified. I didn't get kicked off the track for being too slow, which does happen. And so that was a huge achievement for me, in that I pushed my body to a physical limit that I personally haven't seen it, which is great. And in terms of impact, this podcast, I haven't been actively marketing it or getting on social media and making sure that links are out there and reminding people that here is a new episode that you can listen to. I definitely lacked in that aspect. However, because there are more episodes now, I've found that very naturally the impact has 2x'd, which is always a nice feeling. That more people are stumbling upon the podcast and listening to it and hopefully gaining some value from it. And that is like that in my opinion is it's just a positive thing, and it is almost a manifestation of the compound effect that I can see when I look at the stats of my podcast. If I go back to this time last year, I might have had in a good month about 40 people listening to the podcast. I mean, now that is probably 100. Now it's still very small numbers, but it is a very clear upwards trend, and so I'm very grateful for that and happy with that. I thought I made very good progress in my self-investment, continuous improvement, and I studied a broad areas of the subjects this year, ranging from intellectual property, IT law, governance, software, and sales. So I tried to make sure that I had a very broad base, and I was happy with that. And another one was I read 23 books. Now, this wasn't my target. My target was to read 50 books, but I got through 23, and that itself is incredible. Because that is more books than I've read in a year, probably for a very long time and possibly ever. Maybe I read that many books when I was in like primary school and it was just really short fiction books, but I don't think even as a teenager or as an adult that I've read that many books in a year, and I think I gained a lot from that process. So it's very happy, and I think the biggest thing that I'm happy about that I achieved in 2023 was I had the courage to leave my job and organize everything that I needed to do to travel around the world, which I will be doing this year. Now, in terms of what I didn't achieve, purchasing a property. So that was a big goal for me, and it has been a big goal for me, and I'm not too disappointed about not purchasing a property because I realized that it's maybe not the right thing for me to do right now. I have pushed this out to, I'd say, 2025. I think that's more realistic, especially as I am traveling the world this year. But the reason I look back on that decision to not purchase a property and say it's a negative thing is the reason that I stopped looking for properties was out of fear. We had a senior engineer at work get laid off, and I remember that caused a lot of fear in me, and I had a pre-approval meeting booked the week after that happened, and I cancelled it because this person lost their job I was all of a sudden fearful, and I made a lot of actions out of fear. Now, compared to some people, that's probably a good thing. Some people are going to see something like a layoff happen in their workplace, and they might be negative, but they might also be complacent and not do anything. I was negative, and that definitely did impact me. It did embed a little bit of fear in me, but my reaction to that was to take as much action as I could. So one of those was to say that, just start putting money away and evaluating your options and don't purchase the property, which is fine because now I can see that that is probably a good decision. What I don't like is that it was driven out of fear. And that being driven out of fear also led me to invest in some certificates and things I would have normally done, but I brought those timescales forward. So I did an AWS cert last year, the intro one, and I completed it 2 months after that person got laid off. Because as soon as they got laid off, within 15 minutes, I'd ordered cracking the software engineering interview and a few other resources like that. So I was very much in a reactive mode, which again, I think is a good thing, but I think there is also a much higher level of operating. I don't want to operate out of fear, out of scarcity. I want to operate out of abundance. So that is something that I need to reflect on and change. That the house can be deferred, but I think the mentality behind why I didn't do it isn't particularly helpful. I always do a software curriculum. That's another thing I do at the start of every year. And I made limited progress to it. I did learn a lot of things at work, but what I had defined, I didn't make too much progress on. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but one of the things that I definitely looked at were there were 2 books on my software engineering curriculum, Domain-Driven Design and Clean Architecture, where I got through portions of it, but I didn't finish the books. Now, the sad thing about that particular objective that I didn't meet was I did read 23 books this year. And some of those books were software engineering books. So the fact that I didn't read these 2 books means that I did not appropriately evaluate these plans throughout 2023. So one of my big failures is I did not do frequent reviews. And that's something that I could have done differently. Essentially, I only reviewed my 2023 goals and objectives at the end of the year before that session on the 30th of December, the one I was talking about. That's really good to do. So I can definitely see that as a personal failing, that if I kept these goals and objectives in my line of focus, somewhere in front of me where at frequent enough periods that I reviewed these things, I could have easily finished reading those books this year. I just wasn't doing that, and that is something I definitely need to improve on. So I've decided that for 2024, I will be reviewing all of my goals and plans every 3 weeks and just doing a quick evaluation against how I'm tracking. I think that's a frequency that it's not too often, but it is not too far apart that you lose track of things. So I think a 3-week review frequency is very healthy. And even though I think the last thing that I think I could have done differently is, even though I think I definitely pushed myself physically in terms of running a marathon and getting into running more in general, getting a smartwatch, a Garmin smartwatch definitely helped me gamify physical exercise, and I'm happy for that. I think my general health wasn't that good, and it's because I was affected a lot by stress and a lot by what was happening around me, both at work and in my personal life, and I definitely let it get to me, and my sleep was poor, my diet was poor, and really the only redeeming factor was that I was exercising. But I think in 2024, I now have the opportunity where, at least for the first 7 months of the year, I have made it impossible for me to go back into the paradigm of working. Of course, that will change, and I do expect it to change because I would like to re-enter an enterprise environment, but for now I have this tremendous opportunity where I can prioritize my health. So that is definitely something that I want to give more focus to in the new year. And I think fundamentally, if my health isn't at its tip top, then everything else around me will suffer, and I definitely did see a bit of that this year. So now that I've thought about my 2023, I started to think about 2024, and really I had a couple of major goals, and a lot of these are goals which I've already talked about. So the first one, which is a new goal, and this is very much in line with what I want to do in 2024, is launch 6 digital products and services with $2,000 monthly revenue. It does not need to be recurring, but I would like to hit a $2,000 monthly revenue target. And that's just for starters. But the way I see this is one of the things that I've personally enjoyed and since becoming a software engineer is creating, but I realize I can do a better job of that. And to do a better job of that, I need to take full responsibility for the entire product lifecycle, including everything from defining what the product is to building it and eventually marketing and selling it. And my whole plan is the core value behind this is I really value freedom. And if you look at my investing goal from last year, investing is a wonderful thing. Well, I started investing back when I was a government worker. I just left uni. I didn't really have any particularly special skills. I didn't have an edge when it came to investing. So what did I do is I put my excess income into passive ETFs, which I think is a great solution. It's probably what I recommend for pretty much everyone because it's such a simple thing to do. Now, I knew that I didn't have the time to research companies and it wasn't something I was particularly keen in. So I didn't have an edge when it came to investing. So I was happy to meet the market returns, which have been great for the time being. But now that I've built specialist skills and have the capability to build specialist skills, and that is in my core domain area of software engineering, and I think that's very important as a software engineer. It's not what you know currently, it's do you have the capability to learn the things you need to learn so you can do the things you need to do in the future. It is not a static skill set. And I've got that confidence to do that. And that gives me what people in investing and finance would call an alpha. It gives you an edge, somewhere where you can beat the average returns of the market. And investing in passive ETFs was a great way to a certain degree, decouple my money from time because I will get, yes, I am working in my day-to-day job to earn the money, but then once that money is in the market, I will get dividends and distributions and capital growth, which are no longer directly tied to the time that I go to work. And you know, I get great returns on that. I mean, so far my portfolio has, over the last 3 years, returned about 12% per annum. However, I know I can do better than this because now I do have an alpha. I've got my software engineering skill set, and I believe that this can give me an edge along with all the other skills that I have accumulated, that I'm allowing to compound, and that I will continue to learn in the future. So launching 6 digital products is a way where I can go one level up in that decoupling spectrum. Now, again, I've dedicated kind of 7 to 9 months to go on this journey to build out these products or to get a head start on building these products this year. But fundamentally, this is something where, yes, I am investing time, and yes, there is the opportunity cost of having quit my job and not having a stable income. But I now have the potential to even further decouple my direct time from money. Because if I have a digital product or a digital service where either somebody can have a one-off payment or subscribe to it, this can now, this is a much more scalable than something like investing in the S&P 500 where I might get like a 7 to 10% return. So you'd get a much higher return on that. And there's the potential that once I've learned that skill set and demonstrated that I can do it on a small scale, that I can take that even further and do much better. So it is a small goal. $2,000 of monthly revenue is significantly less than what I was making in my day job. But the reason it is set at that level is it is a new paradigm that I need to break. I know there's a lot of mental barriers that I need to break to get to the point where I have proven to myself. And I know this can be done because I see it in other people. But at the end of the day, you need to prove something to yourself by doing it, right? Nobody else can go to the gym for me. Nobody else can meditate for me. And likewise, nobody else can break the paradigm of not directly exchanging your time for money than me. It's something that I need to experience myself. It is something that I need to do. So it is a very important goal for me. And I would say that it is my number one goal. It is going to make me, I believe, in addition to breaking the paradigm and decoupling further, decoupling time and money, I think it's just going to make me a better engineer, it's going to make me a better salesperson, and it will make me a better marketer. So I'm super excited about that one. And obviously I do want to be stronger, fitter, healthier than ever, so my fitness and my mental health is very important this year. I know I have the resources in terms of time, so I might have less money this year, but I have a abundance of time because it is a gift that I have given myself in 2024 by leaving my job and deciding to travel around the world and work and live. And this is something that when I do come back to my day-to-day life, I really want to have planted strong seeds in these domains. So I think if I was going to focus on any two things in 2024, it would be launching my 6 products or services and focusing on my health. And if that's all I did, I would be incredibly happy. Now, the third thing that I want to do in 2024, or the third goal I want to kickstart in 2024, is relationships. And I'm not just talking about my general relationships, I'm actually talking about romantic relationships. And this is something that I've never put in my kind of annual plan. The reason I'm putting it in now is I realize it is important. And if I look at my 5, 10, 20 years goals, I do see myself having a family and kids. And if I look at the past 2 years, I've been so focused on my career that I really haven't given much energy to dating and to meeting people. So that is something where I want to reinvest that skill set. Learn how to date again fundamentally, not so I can necessarily find the one in 2024, but so I can be the person who can find someone with similar values to go ahead and create that future. So that is a huge thing that I want to kickstart in 2024, and I'm excited to do it. And again, I've given myself the capacity to go and invest time in that area because I've broken the previous paradigms that I was in, and I'm hoping to shattering some more paradigms this year. I think in terms of software engineering is a big one. It is my core skill. It has so far been my highest value skill in my life so far. And it's a team sport. And right now I've chosen to go down this temporary stint. And I say temporary, it might not be temporary, but the way I've planned it, I've given myself a window where I want to be a full-time individual developer. But I personally know that I really enjoy working with people, fostering relationships, and working as part of a larger organization driven towards a common goal. And that is always an exciting thing, whether it's a small startup or huge company. I believe there's value that I can add in that environment, and there's so many things that I can learn in that environment as a software engineer. So that's a door I want to keep open. So there's things that I can do in my own time in terms of continually studying and continually learning the same way that I have for the last few years. It's not that this is a super important thing that I'm going to be investing crazy hours into, but it is important for me to keep the door open in terms of entering a startup environment in the future or entering an enterprise environment. So that is just a door that I want to keep open as I go down this solo developing path in 2024. And the other things that I have is I just want to keep learning. Like, learning is just a huge thing. So focusing on the reading is going to be huge. I mean, I did 23 books this year, and I got a lot out of it. I think even if you don't recall 100% of what you read, generally you will have a few points which either you didn't know about or definitely challenge the way you think. And I remember if I think about one of the things which challenged my thinking this year in a very big ways, I read a book called Governomics, and it definitely changed the way I thought about how the government works and how big should the government be and what should the government be doing. It was definitely food for thought. So I really enjoy reading material like that where I am forced to think about things and evaluate things and fundamentally either double down on the takes I already have or change them. Because the way I see it is I have very strong opinions, but I should hold them loosely, being that I should be very comfortable with abandoning those opinions once new data is available that says that holding that view might not be the most sensible thing ever. And then in terms of future goals, purchasing a property in 2025 is going to be a big one again. And it doesn't matter how I kind of go about doing this, but I know that kickstarting the process is something that's going to have to happen in 2024. So that is kind of a lower tier goal that I'd like to do in the next couple of years. So in terms of the future, I thought about what future do I want to avoid? And a future that I want to avoid is a low leverage future. If you think about like the goals that I've talked about, everything is about creating leverage. If you have a digital product or service that you are responsible for, it is a higher leverage opportunity than being an employee. So when I was an employee, and I will be an employee again in the future, which is I'm fine with. In fact, there's so many benefits to, again, working in a team environment. That's why I have it as goal. But if I look at one component of that, if I went and made the company a few $100,000 or improved some processes or launched a new product, I might get a new promotion, and that might be a couple of $1,000s, and I might get a pat on the back and a thank you. At the end of the day, there's very low value capture in certain environments. That's not true for all environments. There are some companies which really do go out to reward the people working for them and working with them, either through direct cash compensation or bonuses or equity grants. So there's many ways that companies do that. But generally what happens is there's very low value capture in, I'd say, most organizations. There are organizations where that is not the case. It's not like a general thing, but it is very common for, if you're just a standard employee, your leverage is generally limited. Why? Because the business needs to make profit, and if you make surplus profit, you get your wages and the rest goes to the business, which is fair because the exchange you get for that is you get a very steady paycheck, which I have now given up. But in terms of my personal goals, I'm happy to take on that risk because I want to avoid a low leverage future. I want to avoid low freedom. In terms of relationships, I'd like to avoid bad relationships, avoid being unsatisfied, and avoid a life full of regret. So 2024 for me is about really taking the risk and getting out there. Now, that's fundamentally my 2024 plan. And in terms of there's two additional questions I asked myself this year, and it's what worked well that you want to repeat. And the reason I think that's a very important question in terms of repeating what worked well for you in a previous year is generally where people self-sabotage is you develop some sort of good habit. There's a good practice which gets you to a certain level. And then once you're at that level, once you're at a state where you're like, I'm happy with this, you stop doing the thing which got you to that level of success. So it's almost like if you imagine you are rolling a ball up a hill, you got halfway up the mountain and you really liked the view at that point, and basically you stopped pushing the ball up the hill and the ball starts to roll down. And I think that I've done that a lot personally, and I see other people doing that a lot. So it's really important to identify the things that you believe helped contribute to your success and to make sure that you'll keep doing those things. So some of the things that I think worked really well for me in 2023 were continually gratitude journaling. I think this just changes the way you think about the world because now you're grateful for sometimes mundane things, and sometimes you're forcing yourself to find gratitude on days where it is truly a horrible, awful day. And when you start doing that, you change the paradigm of how you see the world. The next thing I really liked was getting back into meditation, both when I was doing it on an irregular basis, when I was just doing it once a month, finding a one-day retreat, and doing Vipassana again, and trying to reestablish a regular technique. I think meditation was one of the many things which I think definitely grounded me this year and kept me very sane. Using Strava has been a game changer. So this is something I want to keep doing. Social networks have so many perils. I know this if I open my LinkedIn or open my Twitter, it's very easy. Twitter more so than LinkedIn. But with Twitter or X, it's so easy to get sucked into something. There's clearly a gamification going on in terms of how they capture your attention. But if you take that gamification concept and you apply it to exercise, I think that is what Strava does really great. And for me, it's also a way for me to be connected with people as I travel around the world, and for my basically to share the exercise that I'm doing and see what my colleagues and my friends are doing back at home. And I think it's a great way to stay connected. It's a great way to support each other as you maintain and improve your fitness. So Strava is wonderful. And I think that the last thing that I thought was really important, and it's something that I actually haven't done for most of 2023, but as soon as I left my job, I all of a sudden had the need to use Google Calendar very religiously. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I do get things done, but there's kind of mayhem about the way I do things. And even in my work, I would only accept Google Calendar invites through Slack, which is a messaging app. I would never open my email and kind of play with my calendar and do that stuff, unless I was going on leave. But as soon as I left my job, all of a sudden I had this need where if I've got freelance clients, for example, and freelance is a small component of what I'm doing, but if I need to take clients, I need a way of scheduling them in my calendar and making sure that I've got availability to do the independent developing I'm doing. I've got availability for client work. So using a calendar has been incredibly important for, I'd say, the last month of 2023. And I did a few things. I set up a booking page where people can see availability on certain days on my calendar. And I also just started using my calendar religiously to track both work items and social events. And it's given me a really good view of what's coming up, and it's definitely been a very positive thing. So this is something that I want to do in 2024, is use the calendar religiously and make sure that it is the active part of my day-to-day scheduling and my weeks, because it's so far, even in the month that I've been doing it, complete game changer. Now, what do I want to avoid? I think there's two real things that I marked as wanting to avoid. The first is unfruitful people. And the reason I call it unfruitful is, like, there's other words for this. You could say toxic, but I don't think that's a helpful definition. I mean unfruitful as in the people who are takers. They might have negative mindsets. They might just be filled with negativity. And that has a corrosive effect on you. When you're surrounded by people who have that mindset, it is very much a case of, even if you are mentally resilient and you can let these things slide by and pass you, you do let things affect you from time to time. And even if you're not conscious about it, the fact that you're trying to deflect somebody who's negative or who's saying negative things or who has a poor thought pattern and is making excuses, the very act of you deflecting that takes mental energy from you. And that is a very exhausting thing. And so I would rather surround my people who are striving to improve, who have positivity biases, who have action biases, who actually want to go and do things, who aren't helpless. I think I meet a lot of people who, for example, want to improve, but they're a little bit helpless in the way they go about it. They're dependent on you for finding the right information when they have the same tools available at their fingertips, and often for free as well. So I definitely want to surround myself with people who are positive, who are proactive, and who are progressing their lives in the ways that they want to. That doesn't mean that they've got the same goals as me. I think that's great as well. So one thing I've been doing is, if you go to X, you'll find a hashtag called Build in Public. So I've been following a lot of people who are building in public. And what this has done, for example, is it has changed my X or my Twitter feed such that it is now filled with software engineers and people getting into software engineering or indie hacking who are building things, and they're doing something productive, and they're sharing where they've failed and where they can improve and what they changed and how that's worked, compared to getting all this kind of war propaganda and all this bullshit that is on Twitter that is just really meant to detract you and make you feel negative about issues which unfortunately you don't have a lot of impact over. I don't have a huge impact over what is happening in some foreign country. Now, in the future, I would like to think that I would, but currently I don't. And if I want to get to a future where I have more impact, the first person that I need to improve and develop is myself. And so I would rather, the mere act of following more people who are aligned with the things I care about has just changed what the algorithm gives me. And that has been positive, but then you can do this outside of that as well. And I think a big part of this for me is setting clear boundaries in terms of who I can engage or who I will engage with. I think putting myself in an environment where I need to go overseas, and whilst that is an incredible privilege and incredibly expensive as well, this means that for the first time in a very long time, I'm almost starting with a blank slate in terms of who has availability to my time. And I can have greater control of that. And I think that's going to be a very liberating experience, and the important thing that I need to bring back when I do come back to Australia and start picking up some of the things that I was doing last year, right, such as being in a new startup or being in a new company, is making sure that I'm still enforcing those boundaries, because that is super important. I think there's a lot of people, and it's part of my nature to try and help as many people as possible, that there are some people who either don't want to be helped or need so much help and they're not making progress that they've become almost dependent on you. And at the same time, they're draining your energy, and you're ultimately not helping them either. So that is a very important boundary that I need to set. And the last thing is time wasting. And I'm not just talking about social media or Netflix and all of that. That is a way that people waste time, but it is time wasting in problem solving. And this can be a very general thing, but if I take software engineering as an example, when I was working at my previous company, I was fortunate to be surrounded by senior software engineers and a team lead. And we had ceremonies, throughout our week, such as a daily stand-up, where if I was stuck on something, I would have somebody external to me say, okay, well, maybe think about that problem differently, or stop working on that problem and pick something else up, and you'll end up, you come back to a solution. So I had people to kind of sense check the way I was solving a problem. But now that I've left that environment and I need to rely on myself much more, I need to build in the way of avoiding time myself. And that is a very hard thing to do. I still don't know how I'm going to do that. But for example, one thing could be, if I have a problem when I'm writing code or building something, I could try to do it for 20 minutes and try to find a solution myself. Then I should spend maybe another 20 minutes reading docs. And if I can't find it from reading the documentation, I should go ask ChatGPT, for example, and see if that gives me a solution. And if I can't solve that problem in an hour, I should put it down and work for something else, because chances are I will end up finding a solution down the track. And by doing that, by giving it a hard stop, I avoid wasting time when it comes to solving problems, and I can keep progressing on the task that I need to do. So those are kind of the two things I want to avoid, is avoiding the unfruitful, or people with poor mindsets and poor attitudes to life, and avoiding time wasting when it comes to solving problems. Because I really do need to be efficient with the time that I've given myself to go and try something different. I've given myself this incredible luxury of 9 months off work and 7 months specifically for going out and being a full-time independent developer. So I need to make sure that I maximize that. And these are two very important things, so I don't waste the opportunity that I've got. And yeah, that is my 2024 plan. So this has been a particularly long episode because I have gone into maybe too much detail over some of these goals. But it is important to do this review, and I do recommend that in your own time, make time to think about how your year has been if you already haven't done it. Write some things down, and maybe you should also investigate getting a few friends or getting a few colleagues together and going through one of these planning sessions. Give each other 10 minutes to talk about your 2023 and your 2024, and have a 10-minute feedback session after that. So give everyone the space to talk and give everyone the space to receive feedback. And by doing that, hopefully, it will encourage you to put together a plan and put together a reflection. And it will also hopefully help you optimize that plan and eliminate a few of the blind spots which you might have had. So I'm going to leave this episode there. Happy New Year again to everyone listening to this. And I'm wishing all of you great success in all your endeavors. You've just made it through another episode of Monologues by Hassie. It brings me great pleasure to know that you made it to the end. To listen to more episodes, subscribe on your favorite podcast app or visit monologuesbyhassie.com. Thanks for swinging by.